Thanks, Sean. And maybe we can grab a couple screenshots throughout the evening too, possibly. If anybody doesn't mind and can do that, it might be just nice to put up on social media and share what we've been doing. The topic what we want to talk about tonight is, what does it mean? What does sunset mean? The review's coming up, and what impact does it have on the interior design industry in Maryland? So the agenda for the evening is, we'll have some opening remarks about what MDCID is, our upcoming events, thank you to our sponsors, and panel introductions. And then we'll get into the meat of the evening with the panel discussion. And the topics that we're going to be covering is, the basic. What is sunset? What does it mean? What is deregulation? License versus Title Act, and how is Maryland set up? Why is CID important? CID meaning Certified Interior Designer. And what is the current legislative environment as we go into the review of the legislation impacting the interior design industry in Maryland? And what's next? What's our call to action to make sure we maintain strong support in the legislative body in Annapolis? We will have an opportunity for Q&A, so please go ahead and use the chat box in the Zoom window, and we'll get to as many of those questions as we possibly can. We'll have some brief closing remarks from our panelists and a recap of MDCID is and how you can participate. So for those of you who are new to an MDCID event, the purpose of the coalition is to advocate for the interior design profession. And we do this through events like tonight's. We have CEU events, we have student-focused events throughout the year, and the More Design Expo, which we are going to be doing this year. We are so excited that we're going to be able to hold a live in-person event. We financially support our lobbyists, and you will hear from our lobbyists as one of our panelists tonight. And they fight for our credentialing and right to practice. And we earn funds through membership dues, event ticket sales, and industry sponsorships to pay for the lobbyist. MDCID board is made up of volunteers throughout the industry, practicing interior designers, students, as well as reps that are in the industry. So I'm Holly Morgan. I did not introduce myself. I apologize. I am chair, president of MDCID. Our secretary is Becky French, treasurer Scott Goldman. Director of Legislative Advocacy is Heather Flannery, and Sean Higgins is director of logistics. We have a tremendous support group that does so much to make sure we keep things moving, and membership information and sponsorship information, and make sure we have information out on social media on our several platforms. Samantha Rose is membership coordinator. Michelle Bruno is sponsorship coordinator. Victoria Myers, social media. Kristen Johnson, website. Lisa Cole, student coordinator, and she's taken on also the role of professional organization liaison, working with other industry professional organizations with regards to construction and interior design. And Julia Hurd, board member at large, who just pitches in wherever we need some extra support. Our upcoming events, like I said, we are going to be holding the Be More Design Expo. We are looking to hold it in September this year. So look for further details in our July newsletter and on social media. We have started a tech series. We had our first one this spring and looking to have a second one this fall, and that would be a virtual event. It'll be a brief overview of some technology or software that is used within the interior design industry, focused particularly with students, but not necessarily. Professionals are always exposed to new technology and wanting to learn new things. So we want to make this an open opportunity for anybody to hop on and hear just a brief overview of what other software programs and design programs are out there being used. And then we're looking to have a networking event at the end of the year, so stay tuned for further details for that. A huge thank you to our sponsors for 2021. Without them, we would not be able to do what we do. Platinum sponsors, Division 9. Gold sponsors, Eris and the Verve Partnership. Our silver sponsors, District Lighting Group, Rockfront, Target, NFD, and JP2. And our bronze sponsors, Stanley Stevens, Price Modern, Monkey in the Metal, Andrew World, Parterre, TUI, Light Art, and Conestoga Tile. So I'd like to introduce our panelists for this evening. First is our lobbyists, Barbara Mercado and Dan Shattuck from Barbara Marks Mercado and Associates. They have been our legislative lobbyists since 2002, and they have successfully gotten defeated legislation with regards to sales tax of interior design services. They've preserved the state certification of interior designers with the Board of Certified Interior Designers in 2003 and in 2012, and extended the sunset to 2024, which is why we're talking about it right now, because it will become under review in 2022 for that expiration in 2024. They've secured passage for legislation that allows certified interior designers to apply a mechanics lien, and they've opened up dialogues with local code officials about what it means to be a certified interior designer, that certified interior designers can sign and seal documents and encourage the acceptance of those documents. We also have Matthew Baruch, Government Affairs and Advocacy Manager with CIDQ. And Matt supports the advances of CIDQ policy agenda in the state and provincial level. And he's responsible for monitoring legislation affecting the interior design profession. Catherine Richardson is CID, and she is at Air St. Gross. Catherine is a former MDCID board member, and she has gone through the sunset once before, and she was our legislative director for 8 years. Kelly Ennis, CID IIDA, is founding and managing partner of the Verve Partnership. And Kelly has been involved in corporate interiors for the past 25 years. And her focus is looking at the trends that affect employee engagement, performance in businesses in the built environment. She's involved in other industry and non-industry associations, and she holds certified and licensed interior design credentials in several jurisdictions. So I wanted to kind of start our discussion with just a quick kind of by the numbers look at where we are in Maryland with regards to NCIDQ active and inactive holders, active NCIDQ members, and then the current CID number in the state, the number of certified interior designers in the state. So currently there are inactive and active 751 NCIDQ holders in the state of Maryland. 308 of those are active, and we have 347 current CID holders. Keep this in mind as we have our discussions and how important it is to increase our CID numbers to really get closer to that. You know, if we can get as many of active and encourage those that are inactive to get their active membership back up with NCIDQ, it would really help how our legislation is supported in Annapolis. So without additional prologue, let's get with our first question with the basic is, what is sunset? And Dan, can you discuss that, please?
Or let Barbara jump in here.
All right, you know, and we can do this, and Dan and I had talked, and we might meld some of the components here, but let me start. I'm the oldest in the group, so I'll start. Okay. Right. I'm not going to be I'm going to stay on point here, but just a few things I want to say, which is what a pleasure it's been to work with the coalition over the years, and what an amazing job you as volunteers do to help your the folks you work with, and help the profession be recognized as a meaningful part of the design build environment and protecting the public. So, you know, I would love to name names, but I couldn't name all the names of the leadership of the coalition that's here with us this evening. And then, you know, the hundreds and hundreds of hours that have been donated to the work of the coalition. So Dan and I have been really thrilled to be with you, and you're a strong and committed group. So, so what is Sunset? So, you know, Sunset is a review of the activities and the role of your board, the Board of Interior Designers, and an indication of, you know, really, I would say, how the profession is faring in terms of its recognition and in terms of the training requirements, educational requirements, experiential activities of the profession. So when a health occupation is recognized in state law, it's done so for the purpose, the sole purpose, that legislative bodies enact these laws is for the protection of the public. And so when there is a review of the board, what they consider is what you're doing to protect the public. You know, what you are doing to protect the health, life, and welfare of the citizens of Maryland. You know, what are your qualifications, what the educational requirements are, what the accreditation is, what kind of continuing ed you have. You know, those are the things that they're looking at. They're looking at even, you know, what comes into the board. Are there complaints? Are there not complaints? Is there an indication of how the board is protecting the public? So that's the Sunset process. That process occurs not just in the design build environment, but that process occurs for many professionals. And for instance, all the healthcare professionals that are, I guess, our mainstream healthcare professionals, doctors, nurses, physical therapists, psychologists, alcohol and drug counselor, you know, every single one of these professions, acupuncture, many health professions have boards. They're reviewed, the plumbers, the electricians. So these are boards that are not to be serving the profession, but to be serving the public, to make sure the public understands who that profession is, what that profession's training is, what they can expect from that profession. So all of these boards are reviewed periodically to make sure that they are doing what was intended when the statute was passed to recognize that profession. So that's the basic foundation of what we're talking about here. So I think I'll just anecdotally say, what does it mean? In my estimation, what does it mean to be certified? First of all, it gives you credibility with your the other professionals that you work with. The architects, the engineers, the surveyors, the landscape architects. It gives you a seat at that table. And just again, anecdotally, in Maryland, there's a body that is not formally written in law or anything, but there's a body with representatives from each of these professional groups that meets regularly, talks about legislation that affects design build, and shares positions, and sometimes even has gone as far as, you know, having events for elected officials. That's a shared activity to bring more visibility and education to members of the General Assembly and to regulators. So that's very important, and it's very important across the board. It also gives you a platform for being named in projects, in construction design
All right, I'm
projects.
going to ask you to hold that thought because you're jumping ahead a little bit on me.
Okay.
I want to take this a little bit step by step.
Okay.
So kind of as what Sunset is, thank you. Great explanation of what they're going to be looking at and why it's so important to have that CID and bring those numbers up. But on kind of the other side of that, what does deregulation mean? What happens if it's set up and they decide to let it expire? And kind of, I want to hear from, on the lobbyist viewpoint and on the professional practicing designer viewpoint as to what impacts you would see happen to the industry.
All right, well, let Dan do that one from the lobbyist viewpoint, and then you can go down the line. All right.
Thanks.
I'll
Brenda.
pass the torch.
From the deregulation point of view, if the board was to cease its operations, essentially that would mean that the protections that you are entitled to by having a certificate or being a certified interior designer, your ability to sign and seal, the protections that you can gain through applying a mechanics lien, those would all essentially go away, and you would be, I guess, level set back with, those interior designers who, are still able to practice in Maryland because and I know this is the next question, but I know because we're not a license act, we're a title act. The title certified interior designer is a protected title. So you can't call yourself that unless you've, done, everything that you need to do to get that certification. So that would go away. So then any benefits and protections afforded to that. So, and that would be a big step. And that would be a big step. And I'd be curious just to hear, I know Matt, who's on the panel here as well. Other states, there have been efforts to undo and overturn regulation of interior designers. We have not had that battle per se here in recent years. When Barbara and I were first brought on to work with the coalition during the first Sunset Review, there was in fact a recommendation to do away with the board. And we were able to lead the effort to ensure that in fact the board wasn't overturned and continued on for another 10 years and then 10 years following that. So it's a very important protection for the public, as Barbara mentioned, and then I think it's an important benefit for your profession as well. So I will stop there to let some other voices chime in.
I would just add that, and as I'm sure Barbara and Dan already know, there is a prevalent a prevalent sentiment on deregulation, a trend of deregulation amongst the states at large. This is something that is typically adopted in more conservative state governments, and deregulatory efforts in the name of eliminating commercial burden or burdens into the profession, and eliminating burdens into commerce and business. These efforts have been increasing as of the last few years. Just this year, there was deregulatory efforts in Mississippi. A bill was introduced and got relatively far. It passed the first chamber and fortunately died in committee in the second chamber. We dealt with deregulatory efforts in Florida, where legislation was introduced that would repeal a litany of occupational regulations for a whole bunch of professions. That bill has since been converted into a review similar to what we're looking at here, where the legislature will now review regulations for occupations every 5 years or so. And so we are seeing a deregulatory trend throughout the country. And I think the point is that we should not take the coming legislative campaign for granted, being this will not be a pro forma, kind of going through the motions type of campaign, even though it seemingly should be that way. It will require an intensive effort to justify the existing law and to show that the board and its existence is serving the public protection. And I can go a little bit more into the national scale landscape of interior design legislation at the appropriate time.
Thank you, Matt. Catherine, Kelly, from a practicing design perspective, what would you see, or what are your concerns if there is deregulation, and what are your thoughts on preventing that? Kelly?
Catherine can go first. Yeah.
Okay, Catherine.
I was going to say Kelly. I was going to let her go. You can go.
Well, actually, I was more interested in Kelly's answer just because she's the firm owner. And so that's going to have a completely different effect on her as an owner that it does on me as a designer. The thing that I really like about Maryland's design certification is that it doesn't bar people from the interior design industry or calling yourself an interior designer. Because we have that Title Act, anyone can call themselves an interior designer. But what's special about our Title Act is that if you pass this exam, the NCIDQ exam, and stay up on your education, you can become a certified interior designer. And I think that holds weight. But if you're not interested in it, then you're still not barred from the profession, which is one of those things I think that Matt was talking about. When they try to deregulate, they say, oh, well, let's not have this board because you're not letting interior designers who don't want to have this NCIDQ, which is mainly people who work in residential fields, because they're not working with, the public health and health, safety, and welfare of the public, because they're mostly working in residential design. So, that's one thing that I think if they were to start bringing it up, let's deregulate, because you guys are stopping others from working in this profession. I think we have a strong argument to say, well, with this Title Act, we're actually doing the best, I think, for both sides. Those who are interested in becoming certified can do so and call themselves interior designers, and those who aren't interested can still be interior designers. And it's, so you're not really kicking anyone out of getting any kind of jobs. It's more regulating the people who are going to be working in more of the commercial field or in areas where you're working with the health, safety, and welfare. So, Kelly?
Yeah, no, that's great. That's great. Awesome. So I appreciate that opinion, Catherine, and we've known each other for a very long time. So as a designer, I absolutely agree with you from the standpoint of, sorry, I'm in my car. Thank you, Zoom. But I really do appreciate that opinion. As a business owner, I really focus on, the occupational aspect of what we do as an industry. And I use this state of Pennsylvania, which is where I'm from originally, as an interesting comparison to the pure opportunities that we have here in Maryland that sadly I don't think a lot of our peers are taking advantage of. As an example, as a business owner and as a designer, our occupation is flat out not recognized. So if you go to a 4-year institution, as a college graduate of a 4-year institution in interior design, your occupation is not recognized. And I think that is just absolutely devastating. If as a parent and a student, you're going, Pennsylvania has a lot of amazing accredited colleges for interior design, interior architecture, and design generally speaking. Yet when you graduate from those colleges, your occupation is not recognized. That is a problem. And I know there are organizations and design firms here in Baltimore City, and I know Eris being one of them. They've hired a ton of people and or recruited, as which we have recruited as well, people from the state of Pennsylvania who have gone to these colleges that are absolutely amazing with fantastic programs, because they can't do anything that we're talking about right now. And as a business owner, I employ people. I contribute to the economic success of Baltimore City, albeit in a very small capacity, but we are employers. And it is very, very important to me as a taxpayer in Baltimore City, as a taxpayer in the state of Maryland, that our industry is a recognized profession, because not only do we put in blood, sweat, and tears into every single thing that we do for our industry and our clients, we go to school for this. And that is critically important. And now, as a parent of a child who will be looking at colleges within the next year or two, where am I going to send my child, and where do I want him to work in the context of what I want, of what he wants his profession to be? I think our profession needs to be recognized. It is absolutely recognized in the state of Maryland. We have credentialing bodies that support that recognition. And I think we as an industry really need to rally around the conversation, as both designers and business owners. And the majority of the people know I could talk for hours on this, but that's my short story. So thank you.
Not yet, Kelly. There's legislation pending in Pennsylvania. So hopefully, fingers crossed, we'll get some practice rights in Pennsylvania as well. And there are a number of bills pending in state legislatures across the country that would bring those practice rights and bring that legal recognition. And I think, that speaks to the importance of preserving what's already on the books in Maryland.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So this was a great segue into the next piece that I want to dissect. And we've talked about Title Act and license and Practice Act. What is the difference, and why is it important to know the difference? Matt, Dan?
I can start. I can take that one, Dan, unless you want to. So right now, as I understand it, there are only 2 states that have licensure acts that require certification in order to practice interior design in the states. And those states are Nevada and Louisiana. The rest of them, when we talk about title acts, these are voluntary. This is voluntary regulation. This is regulation that does not prohibit interior designers from practicing in the state, from calling yourself an interior designer, but provides for that protected title of registered interior designer. And I think it's Maryland, it's certified interior designer. So in the state of Maryland and in states that have title acts on the books, you cannot call yourself the registered interior designer or certified interior designer unless you have satisfied the requirements, the education and examination and experience requirements set out by the state. And in some states, and so 27 states now regulate interior design. Of those 27, the two, Louisiana and Nevada, are licensure act. The rest are title acts. And in a dozen of those states, hopefully in 13 by the end of this year, in a dozen of those states, that protected title comes with practice rights, comes with the ability to apply liens on properties, comes with the ability to sign and stamp your own plans, and CIDQ, ASID, and IIDA, along with the coalitions of each state, work to expand the practice rights in states that have Title Acts on the books and to introduce Title Acts, because that ability, those practice rights, are incredibly important to the ability of your ability, practitioner's ability to provide your services to your clients. Dan, anything you want to add to that?
No, I think that, I mean, that's a good description. It's been an issue that has been put on the table here in Maryland. A number of years ago, there was an effort to move from a Title Act to a Licensure Act, and that met with a lot of opposition from some of the other design professionals, but also within the design community, because the point that Catherine raised earlier is right now Maryland doesn't restrict people calling themselves interior designers. So when you move to that Practice Act, that does protect the term interior designer. So then those that have been, plying their trade and, and working under the name of interior designer, suddenly that becomes a big shift. So it's not certainly an effort that you make lightly, but I think when it was being made, it was in that context again of you have the licensure and you have certification because you're putting out to the public and you're putting out to the state that I have these qualifications, I have this education, I have this experience, that the work I'm doing is intended to make places visitable and safe, and for employees it's to be safe, and for the public walking through these buildings it's going to be safe. And that state and the federal government and municipalities, they want those assurances that the people working on their projects are indeed skilled and know what they're doing. So in the vein of going from a certification act to a licensure act, I think that was the lens through which we were looking at the time. But then you hear the groundswell of what that really means to the everyday industry. It's a big impact. So it's an interesting distinction, but I think it's one that's important, that there be some level of recognition and acknowledgement of who you are and what you do and what you're capable of.
I think that opposition that groundswell you're talking about, Dan, it's consistent with the national trend that we've seen towards deregulatory efforts. And I think that's why the professional organizations routinely choose to pursue Practice Rights Act, as we call it, or the protected title acts that come with those practice rights, as opposed to licensure. The political viability just isn't there for licensure at the moment.
And I think the only thing that I would add, Matt was making a good point, was that there are lots of states across the country that are introducing legislation to get a Title Act, to get a Practice Act, and kind of things. That's a really, really very big push. And although we have a big push in making sure that our profession doesn't sunset here, it's much less. I'm going to say it's much easier to keep these laws on the books that we have now than try to start from ground zero. So if we can put in the effort here to keep it going, I think that's the easier route than having them shut it down and having us to start all over again.
And to that point, we've been more successful than, as I understand it, in previous years with pursuing practice right legislation in the states. We're this close to getting something signed in North Carolina. We got our repeal date removed in Utah. So now in Utah, the Title Act exists in perpetuity. And we had a sunset bill in Illinois this year that is on its way to Governor Pritzker's desk. But even with the sunset bill that would extend, originally the bill would extend the sunset for another 10 years. Then, legislators came out with amendments, and that timeline got cut down to 5. And then even with that, we had opponents coming out and saying that this bill should not be renewed. This bill, opposing the legislation that just simply extended the sunset repeal. So, I think we should not take passage of our extension for granted. And I think the fact that we are introducing it in 2022 when it doesn't expire until 2024. I think that says everything about, that we should not take this for granted. This is going to be a battle.
Kelly, did
Matt,
you,
I think,
you wanted to add?
yeah, so Matt, I think that's a fantastic point. And as a panelist, I have a question to the other panelists. I think it would be interesting to explore. So yes, it's easier to keep a bill moving forward and not having to deal with recreate the wheel. But I'm curious with other states such as Colorado who have explored and actually been acknowledged. Interior designers it was actually a permit passage. It wasn't a title act. It wasn't a practice act. It was an actual, they kind of stripped all that out of their bill. And interior designers in the state of Colorado with zero restrictions can actually stamp and sign drawings under a permit provision. I'm curious, Matt, if you know anything about that in great detail.
So as I understand it, Kelly, Colorado is a unique animal wherein there's, there's no title act on the books, but if you attach your NCIDQ certification to your plan, then the department will stamp that. That's only in Colorado. I don't think any other state does that. So yeah.
No, it was a unique approach. And I just think it's worthy of all of us just kind of being aware of what other states actually do. Because I think because it just gives us as an industry a layer of credibility, regardless of a title or a practice act of sorts. I always go back to, we did our time in college. We have sat for tests. We are credentialed. And it's hard to, like you said, in Florida and Utah, they had some big boulders to push uphill, and they were all extremely successful. In the state of Washington, you still can't practice, correct me if I'm wrong. Much like the state of Pennsylvania, let's hope all those bills pass. But we've all worked really hard, and I think that's why it's very important for all of us on this call and in our industry in the state of Maryland to realize that the opportunities that we have in this state are actually pretty sweet, and they don't exist everywhere else. And that's why, if you go back to Holly's chart, 750 people and only 200, 25% of us are involved. It needs to be higher than that. And we need to show up.
Yep.
And I think that's really important.
And I think that's a great point, Kelly. There is something to be said for legal recognition of the profession and a recognition that you are all qualified to protect the public in the built environment. And there are going to be inevitably some interior designers who are going to say, well, this doesn't affect me. I work at a large firm. I can just easily have an architect stamp my plans. I don't need this. Why would I come out in support of it? Well, I mean, you're not only supporting the profession in general by coming out and asking for this sunset to be extended, but think about how your circumstances might change, right? I was on a call with a group from Iowa earlier today, and talking with a gentleman who was employed by a large firm and then got laid off during the pandemic and now started his own business. And so where that stamp and seal privilege didn't necessarily apply to him in the past, it does now, because now he owns his own business and he owns his own firm, and that ability to stamp and sign on his own plans for permitting would greatly benefit him. So, it has to be, we have to be very forward thinking. We have to be much broader thinking in how we, think about regulation and legislation. And I would encourage everybody on this call to, tell your colleagues to think that way.
Barbara, you had a comment?
Yeah, I'm just trying to stay on point here because we want to be cognizant of the fact that we're in Maryland and we've got a job to do. The background is very important, Matt, but we've got a job to do here. And so there's always lots of ways that, I've been in this stuff for 40 years. there's lots of ways, and state structures are often very different. But where we are here in Maryland, and I'll just say is, next session, we need to protect what we have. We need to protect what we have. We need to do it in a professional way. We need to do it in a way that takes advantage of the opportunity to educate legislators between now and this session in January. And we need to identify stakeholders that will be at our side, and we have to identify the naysayers, like the deregulators and the architects or any other naysayers. But right now, we've got to focus on our structure. We can then, once we get through this, look at other models, what we might bring in and how we might want to change the law.
So kind of keeping in the same genre of the importance of the continuation of the legislation, what have you found on the practice side for government work? Is it a requirement? Is it a requirement to be certified within the state if the state has the certification? Or is it NCIDQ is enough? Kelly, Catherine, what have you found on your government work?
As part of a larger firm, and even as part of a smaller firm, that's usually, if that's called for, it's usually it's been covered by someone else in the firm or covered by an architect who's in the firm. So I haven't had to deal with that. I guess personally as a designer, I know that there are definitely government contracts that come out that say only certified interior designers may work on these contracts. I don't know if it's all of them. I know it's some, and that's probably not a very helpful answer.
So so when I've been with larger firms locally and regionally and nationally, the RFPs that come out typically require a CID as part of the team. And really all you have to do is meet that, the lowest barrier of entry for those RFPs. The problem as a business owner that I have found is I actually can't go after those RFPs as an independent design firm when 50% of our people are actually CIDs and NCIDQ qualified, regardless of, this year, last year, in the last 7 years of our existence, we've always been above and beyond. 50% of our team has been certified interior designers. And I actually can't answer RFPs independently for any sort of interior design oriented RFP because I am not an architectural firm. And that's where, if we go back to regulatory regulatory conversations, I can't answer those RFPs because I'm not an architect. And fundamentally, that really defeats the purpose of having a firm and requiring as a part of our hiring process that either you are NCIDQ qualified and a CID, or you have a path to be NCIDQ qualified and a CID. So it doesn't help us in the government work because we can't actually answer those RFPs independently because we are not an architecture firm. We're not allowed to do that. You can thank the AIA for that.
Thank you for kind of a little bit more insight into that qualification piece. I wanted to kind of jump back to a discussion that we had started earlier on, but now that we have kind of all this background information, refocus on why CID is important. And I think we've said this in several different ways throughout the discussion, but kind of going back to reinforcing the professional approach to what we do and taking ownership that we have a career, to Kelly's point, that we aren't acknowledged, and we need to make sure that we are acknowledged as a legitimate profession, and how we can can push forward with that.
Is there a question in there?
Kind of how can we push forward with that? Yes, there was a question in there. Reopening a discussion point from earlier.
How do we, I'm sorry. So like, how do we
To push
continue?
forward with getting the certificate, the importance of being certified, getting those numbers up, and that it really emphasizes the professional aspects of our chosen careers.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's something like what Kelly's talking about is if, more business owners that are and design firm owners who are saying this is an important qualification for you to have if you're going to work with us. We need to, and sometimes firms they're not against certification. Some of them don't even know that most of the, big architecture firms might not even know that there's a state certification program for interior designers. But if we can get, the bigger firms that work in more commercial spaces to require CID as a hiring option, that'd be wonderful. That'd be a good step. I'd say the big group of people who don't really know what we do are the legislators, like Barbara was talking about, which is basically they're just normal people out in the public, and unless they have somebody they know in their personal life who's an interior designer, they probably don't know much about what it is we do, and they probably don't even know that we have a certification process. So something that Barbara's always drilled into us through the years is we've got to be our own advocates and reaching out and telling people what it is we do and why it's important that we're certified and that we're working with with the safety of people. And that's tough. It's but it's a much easier message to send when you have a big group of people behind you versus just one or two, come in here, come in there. So the bigger the group, the stronger the voice for these kinds of things. And I know when we went through our first sunset, one of the big things that the legislators wanted to know is, well, how many people in the state are certified? And so we went and did a whole bunch of looks at, at the different numbers, and you can be a Maryland resident and NCIDQ, pass your NCIDQ and now be called NCIDQ certified. But you have to do that extra step to be Maryland certified. And I think there's a lot of Maryland interior designers who aren't actually aware of that process. It's one extra step. It's no extra, exam or anything, just another fee and an extra step. But, we've got to, reach out to our own folk and let everybody know what's up. And then we need to get a big old group to start talking to people, people in general public, but then also people in the legislature to educate them on what it is we do and why it is that it's important that we're certified in this work. And it's tough. It's easy to say out loud, but it's very tough to go out there because most of the people who are interior designers are working interior designers, and so they're working in their profession versus working as people to go out and down to Annapolis and talk to folks. So it's always hard to ask people who are busy to take some time out of their schedule and advocate for ourselves. But we are our own best advocates. And so if we can get behind each other and everything, it's that'd be great. That'd be a great push. And just get the word out and get the knowledge. I think I'm repeating myself at this point.
No, I think that, Catherine, I think that's really a fantastic point. And I know Judy's been really fantastic at it in her district down here in the city. And we've tried in our district up in Woodbury. And I think it's getting to know your council people. It's getting to know your legislatures. And it's really, it's not a ton of time. It's just taking that extra step to rally the industry and advocating for ourselves and making us all aware that we could lose this recognition and these credentials in a heartbeat. So we really need to support each other on the conversation. And I know Judy just said something that kind of popped up. It would be lovely if we could really rally our DC peers who do work in Maryland, and a good chunk of those people who work in DC do in fact live in Maryland. So it would be great to rally them as well, because it's not just a Baltimore thing. This is a Maryland thing, and I think we need to figure out how to help each other and build those relationships so we don't lose this, because it can be gone in a heartbeat, and we can be where Pennsylvania is today, or Washington, or I saw, and I know Heather saw firsthand, Utah and Florida go through these painful processes just to prove that we should be a recognized occupation. Like, think about that for a second. A recognized occupation. We have the right to work. And that is what we could lose in a heartbeat if we don't protect what's going on right now.
Barbara, Dan, with the current environment in Annapolis, what do you see as the best approach, or where do you see some weaknesses that we need to kind of build up to educate this group of legislators?
So I just was so glad to hear Kelly and Catherine speak up about engagement. So let's put the environment, Maryland, you know, the environment in Annapolis is, you know, it's always interesting. It's always the same, but changing. You know, we're 2/3 Democratic, 1/3 Republican. So for the deregulation, yes, that's bad, but it's worse in the Republican states. So we've got that going for us. We've also come off of the most unusual session in, I think, my career and any current member of the General Assembly's career, having come off of a entirely virtual 90-day session that was very, very stressful for everyone. I think the most, Holly, I think the most important question is what is the environment? But I think the question is, who do we most need to educate, and how can we do it? If that's all right, because we're here and now. We're approaching, 7 months out, we're going to have a bill. And so we need to, I don't know how we can do this. I think it was Heather that worked with Dan previously on a lot of identifying members of the coalition and connecting them with key legislators and them getting together during the interim. Matt made an amazing comment to us. I mean, just about getting legislators to your workplace, where he's worked on that in some other states. So legislators are hard to get. Everybody still is, going back to what the new normal is going to be. But what we want to have happen between now, I mean, it's the dual effort, is you, the leaders of the profession, reaching out to your legislators in whatever way you can. And we will help you do that. We'll help identify them. We can talk. This is called grassroots lobbying. That's why we're a team. We're kind of the pinnacle of, we've been doing this, but you are the grassroots lobbyists, and you can speak to what you do much better than we can. So, all right. So we've got to organize on that. So I'm going to stop there, because that's not exactly the question that you asked, Holly, and give others an opportunity. Okay.
No, you answered it. I appreciate that.
If I can, real quick, Holly, just interject one quick thing. Not only do you have the practitioner's viewpoint, then you can speak more eloquently to what you guys do than we can, but you're also the constituents of the legislators that are going to, consider this bill, and constituents carry sway. They want your vote, right, in the next election cycle. So reaching out to your own legislator, asking them to support this, that is going to carry a lot more water than it will be if Barbara, Dan, and I take those meetings. So just something to think about.
Definitely. And there was a question that came through, and I think it's a great question. And it's, how can colleges help? Especially now that Maryland is finally on the path of having an accredited program in Morgan State, or even at the community level where there are design programs to ensure that the students that they graduate have an actual legitimate profession, and that they can practice in the state that they're graduating in.
I'm gonna stop taking up everybody's time, but I'm gonna say that's all about identifying our stakeholders and our advocates. And they are at the top of the pile, right up there with you. These educators, the credibility, adding that credibility about what you go through, how highly educated you are, that's huge.
One of the things that we've seen opponents come at our bills often is, you know, saying, you know, they're not educated in things like building codes or things like fire safety, you know, and so educators can bring that unique perspective in what in certified interior designers are actually trained in. And educate legislators so to you know, bat down some of those naysaying arguments that, you know, certified interior designers aren't qualified to do certain things. They are, and this is, the educators can provide that perspective. They can also rally the student body. We've seen in a number of states where students testify for practice rights legislation, and, you know, legislators like hearing from students. They like hearing from aspiring professionals. And so that's another way that, you know, colleges can help, is by bringing the grassroots to the student body.
And I know a big part of the reason that so many of us are so excited about having these programs in Maryland is that sort of what Kelly was speaking to before. Pennsylvania has a bunch of wonderful schools. But if you graduate, if you're from Pennsylvania and you graduate from one of those schools, you've got to go out of state if you want to find a certified position, or if you want to be a certified interior designer. So we want to keep all of our Marylanders here, and we want to keep all the people who are coming to our colleges. We want to keep them here and working in the profession. So I feel stupid that I hadn't even thought of this, but yes, getting the colleges involved, getting emails out, groups out, if we can host things and have legislators come, gosh, all of that would be great. And having an in with legislators and commissioners and things like that is always great. Sometimes it's not what you know, it's who you know. So we'll work on those connections and that's a wonderful idea. I hadn't even thought about it.
Catherine, that's a great point too, though, is that the idea of keeping aspiring professionals in the state is a very compelling one.
And most college students are over the age of 18, so they're all voters, right? So they're constituents too.
I'm going to open it up for any final comments or remarks, and then go into, not a lot of questions have come through on the chat. If anybody wants to take themselves off of mute, and we can have more of a little bit of a more open discussion, but I'll go around the panelists and just kind of any final thoughts. Barbara, I'll start with you.
Yeah,
Okay. Oh, there's Dan. I've been doing lots of talking. Dan's unmuted. There we go.
sorry, I've been having some connectivity issues. I guess I'm just thinking in terms of this discussion that it was, I think, a really good one that touched on a lot of all the important areas. And as we go forward and we learn how the process is going to unroll, and as we look to continuing the board, I think this has been a great starting point discussion, not just from the leadership of the coalition, but everyone who's joined in today. I think it's been great to see the numbers of folks tuning in, just to, to take that level of interest, to take time out of your evening after, I'm sure, a long day of work, or maybe even in between Zoom calls, to join us tonight. I think it's good. It shows that there's, an interest, and that's advocacy. When you talk about grassroots, it's learning about what's happening, and it's taking that 5, 10, 15 minutes, an hour to learn more. And maybe that doesn't translate to you coming into Annapolis and knocking on legislators' doors, but maybe it plants that seed when you're talking to your colleagues, when you're talking to your neighbors, or you're talking to friends, and they bring up something in the legislative world, or you make a connection with a legislator, and then you introduce yourself and think, I'm not just, Joe constituent, I'm Joe constituent, but I'm an interior designer. And do you know what we do? And do you know that your state certifies us? And it's very important what we do. So this is just, I think, a great effort on MDCID's part and your outreach efforts. And there's a domino effect and a ripple effect. And I applaud everyone, here tonight. And then for those that have put in, as Barbara said, the blood, sweat, and tears for years and years and years. This is not necessarily the pinnacle of the work, but maintaining the professional credibility is something to be proud of. And, we build from that, we move beyond the sunset and we look at the issue that, Kelly, you raised, and how do we direct some more of these procurement opportunities to independent interior designers, and how do we make sure that, even within the design community, there's a level playing field. So I think a lot of great things have come out of this discussion tonight.
I would agree. And just to piggyback off of what Dan said briefly, I think, it is going to, it is going to be an intensive effort that is going to take the commitment of everybody here and of the larger interior design community in Maryland. And I think that the turnout tonight and some of the engagement that we've seen with the coalition is a promising start. There's a lot of work to do moving forward to be successful in this campaign, and we will need your help.
I'd say one of my requests for Barbara and Dan is to help us all with the language. We all want to be telling, we all want to be sending the same message, right? So sometimes it's helpful for all of us to have the same nomenclature. If I'm not sure if these things have bills yet, have bill numbers, or if they have names, or making sure we say, the sunset legislation, or calling it what it is, and making sure that that we're all saying the same thing when we talk to, write in, whatever it is that we do. And so I would look to you two to get us that nomenclature, so we sound smart when reaching out.
There are definitely some follow-up conversations after tonight with Barbara and Dan and Matt and MDCID, so we can make sure we push forward as a unified effort, and with our colleagues, as well as with the legislators in Annapolis. Barbara, do you have any closing thoughts before we take?
Yeah, I think, Holly, I think you've nailed it. I think this is, this is where we live this day in, day out, and we are here to help develop a robust grassroots effort with you. You're going to be doing it. We're going to help structure, help you identify those key legislators, the key touch points, and emphasize the different ways you can do it. Again, even as we look at this, as I said, the interim is an opportunity. A lot of these folks will only have 20 minutes, so they'll want to go to the Starbucks in their district. Okay, but if you can get them to a workplace, if you can get them to a project, that's great. Another thing is, and this can just be done with one or two, but we'll look at this, also recognizing them, a couple events coming up. If you're working on a project that's going on now and it's in one of these guys' districts, it is a time to bring them in. And so we want to help you explore that and get that word out to your membership. We don't have a bill number yet, and when we do this, we're going to cast it in how much you do and the importance of continuing this, so you can continue to do what you're doing and actually build on what you're doing now. It's really wonderful, because previously when we went through Sunset, we didn't have a program in Maryland. So that's really wonderful that we do now.
I want to open it up if there's any questions from the attendees. Feel free to take yourself off mute. Be brave.
Hi, Holly and group. This is Kim Morrison.
Hi, Kim.
I'm the one who put in the chat about colleges and education. I'm the program coordinator at CCBC, which is a 2-year program. I'm also teaching adjunct, and I've been at Morgan since its inception of the 4-year program. I just had 3 CCBC grads complete their 4-year degree at Morgan. So I think what I'm proposing is a couple different things. So think about this. One is obviously rallying students. Add to those NCIDQ numbers those that have maybe passed the IDFX and are in the system to continue through the testing process, not just those that have already passed the test. The other thing I wrote in the message was, so we have had conversations with Chantel Vilmore at Montgomery, who has a 2-year program, and Julie or Alexis, help me, Mike Ryan at AACC, and how we as community colleges can support that 4-year program. But I think we can go to our department chairs, we can go to our presidents. They're the ones that are connected to the state legislator because that's who they're going to get funding. I have no qualm setting up a meeting. Like, can we figure out how to set up a meeting, even if it's virtual, with Dr. Curtinitis and whoever else? Have Barbara, have Matt from CIDQ, Holly, you talk about this so that they understand and they can start to put the plug in for us now.
That's a great point. Catherine, you're
Oh, and we'll host anything. And I believe Morgan will too. Suzanne's dean is all about this 4-year program. So whatever we need to do between the 2 schools, and the others, I think we can make it happen.
My daughter agrees. No, I just was nodding and saying yes, yes, yes to everything Kim had to say. Starting early, talking to people, getting the word out. I'm just all of it. Yes, good.
Kim, you've been such an advocate for us with your students, and we greatly appreciate that professional support in growing the profession in the state, and excited to see it continue.
In fact, after this meeting, I see most of my study group on this call. We're going to meet. I received a grant because my program is a career advancement type of program to have a study group. So I have a study group right now happening for the IDFX, and the grant helped pay for Q practice for 4 months. So we're working as a group. I want to get these guys through. Some of them are CCBC grads that have previous degrees, and some of them are the ones that just graduated from Morgan. So hopefully we get a group through that IDFX and in the system.
Terrific. Are there any further comments?
Hey, Holly, this
Yeah.
is Heather. I think the only comment that I hope that everybody would walk away from this state of the industry presentation and panel discussion is that if you are currently an NCIDQ holder, go get certified. It's not expensive. It's $38. Well, it's $76 every 2 years.
Slide coming up.
Awesome. But it's worth it. I think we need to hold ourselves to the same standards that architects hold themselves to, because they don't all sign documents, and there's select people when working within architecture firms, and it's a sense of pride for them to get that stamp and to make it as a licensed architect. And we need to hold ourselves to that same, we should be proud of what we do and get certified. It's so easy. It's really easy. And share that information, share it with your colleagues, share it with Kim as you're going through your study groups, and as they're going through class, explain that certified in the state of Maryland is really important. That's my soapbox.
Thank you. So if there aren't any other questions, I'm going to go ahead and wrap us up. So as Heather was starting to go through the costs, after you earn and you earn your NCIDQ certification, to maintain it is a biannual renewal of $75. Matt, correct me if I'm wrong, because that was the most current information I could find.
I believe it's every 2 years.
2 years, yes, biannual renewal, 72. So, what, $36 every year? And then in Maryland, the CID renewal is $76. Again, biannual. So it's not every year that you're paying for it. It's a 2-year renewal. And then another aspect to participating in the industry and strengthening and learning more about the industry in Maryland is becoming a member of MDCID. And we have several different structures, the membership levels. Again, we are the least expensive professional organization in the state of Maryland for interior design. So a little bit of a plug, but something that will really give you a resource for additional information and programs such as this and other industry information. So with that, I want to thank our panelists and our attendees coming tonight and spending time with us. It is a Wednesday evening. It's been a long day and Zoom calls are never fun, and especially in the evening. So thank you for sticking it out and listening and participating and supporting the industry. With that, good night.